Now, may I introduce our second speaker, Dr. Nanda Kishore. Dr. Nanda Kishore is an associate professor in the Department of Geopolitics and International Relations, Manipal Academy of Higher Education, Manipal. He holds an MPhil and PhD in political science from Hyderabad Central University, India. He completed his postdoc at University of Leiden, Netherlands, with Erasmus Mundus Fellowship from European Union. Dr. Kishore has been working on conflict resolution, West Asia refugees, and international law, and internally displaced persons and governance. He was a recipient of short-term junior research fellowship by UNHCR, Brookings, USA, Government of Finland, and MRG Kolkata. Dr. Kishore was also conferred the prestigious International Visitor Leadership Program IVLP by United States State Department of Government of United States of America during June-July 2013. He is an analyst at Islamic Theology of Counterterrorism, London. With this brief introduction, now I hand over the session to Nanda Kishore. Over to you, sir.
As Dr. Parulekar also spoke about, just few other things that I would want to bring back a bit of back and forth is essentially looking at what was the difference in the Trump administration, because only when we look at that one, then I can or we can talk about is what will Biden be planning to do, in the sense, will there be anything new, or he'll be just dishing out whatever that he had done during his vice presidency along with Mr. Obama, where perhaps it was the lowest in the recent history with regard to the United States itself. Other than great speeches and other things, nothing else had happened. In fact, United States had gone down drastically with regard to whatever we call from the realist perspective, the power projection, in the sense when states are assessed through their economic might as well as the military might. In fact, it started going down, and people started invariably ridiculing United States. In fact, the president of the Philippines used a cuss word against the president of the United States. So that is the state of affairs that United States has gone down to. What did Trump administration do? What is that disruptive component that came in? First and foremost, being a businessman, for him, he thought, I think the United States was spending too much. United States was shouldering too many responsibilities, where it would be the world's bad boy, but it would take up all sorts of burdens. It would spend, where the others, whenever there is something good, they would join, and whenever they have to spend, and whenever they want to have to take some amount of brunt out of it, they would wither away. This is how it was running the show. So what he did was he brought back that primacy of the United States, saying that one, wherever I am there, there's going to be America first. There's going to be my national interest that will come first, and then rest other things. This is the first thing that he brought, which is also famously called as the America First. Second, what he also ended up doing was he ripped some of the bad deals. Where, as I told you, he thought there was no uniformity. There was also no accountability with regard to some of those partners, including that of the NATO, in which he was involved, and he threatened to pull off the way he did the TPP and many other things. Then the same NATO partners who said they would not be caring about it, or they would speak back and everything. There were a lot of expectations on Angela Merkel, Macron, to several others, but none of them could stand against him, and all of them fell in line, and then finally he ended up making greater contributions. This is something that he did. So he ripped the bad deals. Third, he made the allies to pay. As I told you, that wherever he felt that he had to stand for, he stood for. Something like Israel. When Israel always expected a great friend in the United States, though every president, this I have said time and again, every president since Clinton used Israel as part of their, or moving the embassy to Jerusalem as part of their propaganda, as part of their election manifesto. Nobody ever dared delivering. This man delivered, and he delivered something that he promised. That is very, very important one. So he stood by Israel whenever there was an issue. That means when he felt there were certain institutions at the UN or anywhere else, they were discriminatory to Israel, he stood by them. And whether by hook or crook, he made sure that he would also move out of some of those institutions, which we have seen in the recent times or till his administration got over. Fourth one is perhaps people had felt that China is sort of a necessary evil. That means you just cannot get away with. You have to survive with that one, and it's going to be harsh, but there is no option. More so with regard to the European countries, if you precisely look in the type of economic might that probably that they should be able to throw much more light on than on that one than me. The economic might that China had spread, or the way it has spread its tentacles across the spectrum, people felt that it was inevitable and there is no possibility of stopping China at all. Now he found an opportunity to punish, and he also felt that there was a possibility, or one can use the American might to stop it, and he tried doing that one, which the Chinese are aware of, and the Chinese have been were probably praying to get rid of this guy in whatever the way that was possible, because he went soft on Russia, but he went very, very hard on China, and China was facing a terrible problem with this man because he would behave like a businessman. Second, he would also not fear threatening them in whatever the possible way. He tried influencing Canada, he tried influencing every other institution that was possible. So here where he felt probably, or a lot of people across the world felt that he was someone who should have got another term to show what he was capable of, or what the Chinese are capable of. In the sense, either of the things would have come up. Neither we are passionate about China, nor we are passionate about United States. We take a neutral stand here, where either it would have proved that the Chinese are much more stronger internally, or it would have proved that Trump was much more capable and than what people wrote off. So both of things could have happened, but many of the international relations scholars feel that however decisive, however disruptive was Donald Trump, but he was somebody who was extremely capable and who could pull off a lot of things. Fourth, he did not start any wars. That's the most interesting factor. In fact, he cut down on it so much, it should have actually paid him. Unfortunately, I think the pandemic played a different type of ball game, which Trump himself did not imagine, which he handled very badly, no doubt about it. But other than that one, there was no possibility to write off Trump with regard to this particular election. He would have had a cakewalk if had there been no pandemic, actually, because he was doing so well. Second, the domestic audience were happy with regard to the soldiers coming back, no new war starting, and then the amount of money they were spending. Something like a simple statistics can be of Afghanistan. George Bush Jr. and then Obama together. If you look in the money that was spent in Afghanistan was $8 trillion. Now, $8 trillion could have probably run few countries, and their economies are not of that size. So that would have been the biggest advantage that Trump would have had with regard to had he been able to manage the coronavirus or the pandemic in a much better way rather than going a little bullish on that one. The fifth factor is that he somehow did not get bogged down, or he did not get struck with the bureaucracy. This is something that he did out of box, where in every other part of the world, we have seen how bureaucracy controls politics and how bureaucracy controls politicians, including that of ours, where there are so many difficulties because you have divided loyalties. If somebody was promoted in the previous regime and that person would end up showing all his resentment, or he would try working against the present regime, those type of things are a very, very normal problem. And they try also controlling, because not all the politicians are well versed in certain subjects of the state, so in which you have to invariably depend on the bureaucracy. Here it was a classic case where he did not get succumbed to the pressure of the bureaucracy. Rather, he showed the place to the bureaucracy, saying that what he is capable and where he can put people. That's why it was more of a business model, hire or fire, no warning, next morning sort of a behavior, which almost destroyed the bureaucracy, or it threatened them that by hook or crook they wanted to get rid of. That's why some people in different parts of the world felt probably there was some amount of truth when they said there were some issues with regard to the election outcomes, because bureaucracy is capable of doing a lot of things in any part of the world for that matter. So now these are very strong points that he had. And then look at the amount of success. Every US president post 1970s or post 1980 tried to talk to the North Korean leadership. Nobody succeeded ever. But this individual was able to meet the leadership of North Korea twice. And then look at Israel and the Abraham Accord. He was able to pull off something that others did not even imagine about. Look at the way number of countries are just joining like that. There was one in 79, there was other one in 1994. 79 was Egypt, 1994 was Jordan. But apart from that one, nobody ever succeeded. The most liberal president, according to most of the liberal scholars, was Mr. Obama. Even Obama could not pull it off. There were limitations to, but how did he bring these deals? How he succeeded in making some of those people to believe, including that of Saudi Arabia, UAE, and all that. Though Saudi Arabia is yet to join, but at least some of those very, very strong allies to join the Abraham Accord, and how it's actually having a spillover effect. These are certain components of it. Now, looking at what Biden is capable of, what is expected, or the post-Trump world order that we are talking about, essentially, the American leadership is the most crucial one. In this scenario, first and foremost for me, I'm skeptical about is what will he really bring back? If you have to say, will he take us back to the Obama administration, or will he really come up with something that is new? Now, if he's going to set it back to what Obama had done or what had happened during the Obama era, I don't see anything change. There is no great change about it. It's just about your politics. You have spoken something in your election manifesto. You're just going to reset. Then what is the real contribution is going to be very, very interesting for me, because already they have started one after the other. They have started and they entered already to the Paris Accord. With regard to climate change, they're going to start off with many other things, as Dr. Parulekar was also talking about. There are expectations on the TPP. There are many other expectations on the economic front. What exactly is going to do is very interesting, apart from, let's say, the citizenship and many other things that they are talking about. There were also strains with regard to multilateralism of the United States itself. Will the United States take that extra step to reset the multilateral forums, or it's going to bring back all those leaders some amount of confidence, because Trump had rattled many of them? Will that going to be helpful? And that's going to be the world order that we're looking at. What is the real contribution? What is the original contribution, if you ask me? How it's going to be helpful to the world order? I certainly don't have an answer. But will there be a resurrection of the United States? Even that I'm not very, very sure. It might simply help out the Chinese much more. In fact, they were looking for leadership like this, who would be much more worried about the affirmative actions to bring how many blacks would be there, how many Indian origin people will be there in the cabinet and other things, rather than looking at what is going to be the outcome of his administration. If that's the way they're going to be a social justice governance system, then we need not expect anything from them. I'm actually biting the bullet. I'm trying to be very, very open with regard to what we are talking about. Or it's going to be the same age-old style of, again, trying to target Russians. Nothing is going to happen. Nothing is going to happen with regard to Mr. Putin. Putin is, in fact, he is the one who's raising the toast and he's having fun. This is what he was expecting. He was expecting people who are weaker. He was expecting those people who just cannot make decisions to come in there, so that he can continue to be, he can continue to have his own laugh. So that's going to be very interesting, because Biden seems to be very soft on China. He's going to be, in fact, going to have much more cordial relations, and there is going to be a reworking of lot of relationships. That's why the moment Trump's era got over, the Chinese started putting sanctions on a lot of individuals from the United States. Now, if he's going to target Russia, then let's be assured that Putin is going to meddle with a lot of things. In fact, he continues to support Snowden there, and we can expect many more new things that are going to happen from the cyber front. Nevertheless, it's not that the Chinese are going to keep quiet, nor the United States is going to keep quiet. But this is going to be very, very interesting angle, because of the triangular component of Russia, China, and the United States. That's something that we're going to watch out, because the relationship between this triangle is going to define what's going to be the rest of the things. And then do we say this administration is going to be backing the liberal world order? I don't know, because the very idea of the liberal world order itself is confusing, because we don't know whether they're talking about the neoliberal component, are they talking about the trade not being isolationist, not being conservative is liberal world order, or again they're going to start their original project, the United States original project of transporting democracies to different parts of the world. Is that the neo what is the liberal world order that we are talking about? We need to wait and watch whether there are going to be new initiatives on the war side. What is the type of thing? I'm again confused on those components, because if that is going to be the case, again it's going to cost a lot of money. And then this jingoism or symbolism of saying that we'll all do together, we will have an inclusive United States, we are all one, and then try putting up saying that we have a what is a one front, one face, we are all going to work for the United States, but nevertheless again trying to do the same thing of America first. How it's going to work out is very, very interesting. Now, from India's perspective, India knows its trump card, in the sense India knows how to keep the United States in the lobby, in the sense, or how to keep itself very close to, because it continues to believe in the idea of buying arms, and it continues to believe that there here that you need to do certain things that's going to be taken care of. Apart from that one, it still hasn't, though we say the relationships have matured, but it still hasn't gone beyond a particular level. If India is going to continue to say that we are going to go ahead with the S-400 from the Russians, how is the Biden administration going to look at it? Whether it's going to disrupt already set friends with regard to the idea of democracy, or are they going to target every other one who's going to buy weapons from the Russians and then put them on sanctions? How it's going to be? With regard to West Asia, again, you have Turkey, which is trying to be extremely assertive. You have a good friend in Mohammed bin Salman, but his doings and his behavior might not go well with you, but he continues to have very strong hold. In fact, recent rapprochement, or for that matter, recent readjustment of relations with Qatar is also bringing back some amount of importance again to Saudi Arabia, where MBS is trying to lead from the front. So how he's going to define again what are the priorities? They haven't spelled out yet, so we have to look at again other priorities of the world order. If we look in whether it's going to be same NATO, again trying to interfere in Iraq, again trying to interfere in Afghanistan. He's telling that we will relook at the deal and other things. How are they going to relook at the deal? If the deal is something that's been mooted by the Russians, and it was held at in one of the places in Russia, how are they going to relook at it? Are they going to completely avoid the Russians and then trying to do? I don't think it's going to work. So there are many more complications. That's why for me, it's comparatively pessimistic in terms of what is going to be the order that we are looking at, or the new world order under Biden. I believe to a large extent, or 90% of it's going to be just bring back what was there during the Obama administration. And there is nothing that's going to be redefined or something that's out of the box idea that the United States is going to offer at this juncture. That's my humble submission. Probably I'll stop it here.